My educational background is that I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in social work. My PhD is in clinical social work, and so I studied the psychology of people. In the early days of my work, I was studying cases of abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, and analyzing cases in organizations to determine what went wrong in those cases of abuse. Why wasn't abuse prevented, and why wasn't abuse discovered more quickly? Throughout the time that I've worked with organizations, I have designed programs to prevent abuse from happening and work with them to respond properly if it does happen. Beginning in 2002 in the United States, I was working with the Conference of Major Superiors of Men, who are responsible for overseeing all of the religious communities of men in the United States. And I developed an accreditation program for them to ensure that each religious institute was meeting or exceeding the standards of care. The standards of care are those standards that are used to determine whether or not an organization is meeting the expectations of society in terms of preventing and responding to abuse that happens. Because my experience has been focused on developing prevention programs and developing programs to teach people how to respond properly if abuse happens, that's my role with the Sodalicium, is to work with the community in all dimensions to provide people with the information they need to understand the dynamics of abuse, understand the effects of abuse, and to set up the systems that will help them prevent abuse from happening in the future. The training that I'm providing and the educational programs that I'm providing to the Sodalicium has already begun. We have been working with the Sodalicium to provide very in-depth, detailed content about the dynamics of power, the process of grooming, and the dynamics of abusing physically, abusing sexually, and to help them know how to respond if someone comes forward, and how to prevent abuse from happening in the future. There will be a process of developing and providing educational programs, probably for a long time. We want to be sure that not just the core members in the leadership have information, but all the people who are part of the Sodalicium family have the information they need to protect the children in their lives, to protect the vulnerable people in their lives. We want to be sure that that information is not just held within a small group of people, but that it reaches everyone. So far, in addition to talking about abuse, we've also begun talking about the components that really make up a healthy religious life, and the things that are nurturing in religious life, as well as the things that are nurturing in a community that's serving people in ministry. So far, we've met with members of the Sodalites, the Fraternas, and the Siervas, and we're continuing that work and expanding that work over the next several months. Prior to my beginning my work, more recently, the Sodalicium was already using a program that was developed in the United States for the prevention of sexual abuse and the protection of children. They were using the Virtus program, which is the most widely used sexual abuse prevention program in the United States, and has been used in both Roman Catholic dioceses and in religious communities, as well as many other communities of faith that have decided that they wanted to adopt that same program. That work began before I came here. In the beginning of the educational program that I'm providing, I started with helping people understand the experiences of victims. Sometimes it's very difficult for people to understand why someone might not come forward, why someone might not stop the abuse if they had an opportunity to run away. It's really very complicated, so we spent an entire day talking about the experiences of victims. In the second day, we talked about people who might cause abuse to occur, people who are abusers, people who have offended others, and what kinds of personality disorders they may have, mental illness, and how we can determine whether or not a person might be at risk to abuse if they have not abused in the past. In the third day of the training that we've done so far, I've spoken with them about healthy religious life, how to select people to become part of a religious community, how to use formation as a nurturing time, a time to grow and deepen in spirituality. And in the fourth day, we're talking very specifically about schools and ministries that serve children and how we keep those ministries safe. People within the Sodalicium family and people within the extended Sodalicium family may see the enormous issues that are facing the community and ask the question, can this ever be solved? Will we be okay again? And I know that within the Catholic Church in the United States, we asked that same question in 2002 when so many people came forward and said, we've experienced abuse. And yet, when those people came forward and shared that truth with the church, and that truth was received, we were able to learn and grow and become better for it. And today, for us in the United States, we have been through a storm, and we have been hurt. And yet, a new church and a renewal has happened for us because we have not just taken the bad experiences that we had and accepted them. We've taken the bad experiences that we had and we've grown and become better. I really believe that the steps that I see the Sodalicium taking today to be open, to be transparent, to welcome people to come forward, those are the steps it takes to not just survive, but to thrive. When we open ourselves and we ask the question, if you have something to tell, please come forward. Instead of saying, please don't come forward, then we're taking a very important step. That first step was taken when the commission was asked to hear from people who had experienced abuse and write a report. The Sodalicium asked the commission to do that work, and they did that work. And they told very difficult truths. But once that step was taken, no one could ever go back and pretend it didn't happen. And so when I see that type of openness, when I see that type of step, I feel so much hope for the Sodalicium family. And I really believe that it can not only survive, but be so much better in the future. The key steps to fix the Sodalicium really lie within openness, receiving all claims, hearing the concerns of people, listening very carefully, accepting the past, accepting the history, not denying the history, and using that to determine what stays and what goes. And then, and even now, learning so much more about what are the healthy ways that people live in religious life? What are the healthy ways that people interact with children? What are the standards that are alive and well today that we should accept into our community? Much of that work has already begun. And it's very easy for someone to look at a problem that happened maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago and say, oh, that must be the reality today. But it's critical that we know steps are being taken, steps will continue to be taken, but we can't just pretend it didn't happen. That's critical.